Hello, buenos dias, good morning, and welcome to my very special guest today, Mr. Electronic Odyssey, should I say, or Jeff Spoonhower. How are you? A pleasure
Uh,
to meet you.
yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, Christian. Appreciate it.
So, how is everything going? Your side of the things?
Good. Everything's fine here. Keeping busy with work and family and enjoying the beautiful fall weather that we get up here I live in northern Indiana, so we have nice color on the trees right now.
Uh-huh. I spent some minutes this morning checking some of the posts on your Instagram, and I realized that we have much more in common than Genesis and Rush. Yeah, I observed you posted a photo of Leonard Bernstein, whom
Oh yeah.
I used to watch his Concert for the Youth was the name of the series.
Hmm.
Yeah, back in the 70s when TV here in Chile was black and white, so I learned a lot of music. I guess you
Yeah.
also have some interest in classical music, maybe, or maybe just his
Yeah.
quotes. Yeah, huh?
Oh no, yeah. I listen to a lot of jazz, a lot of orchestral music, and I grew up as a brass player in wind ensembles and orchestras and stuff all the way through college. So yeah, I love that type of music, and Bernstein is an absolute genius. Even before the whole movie came out about him last year, he was one of the greatest composers of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah. Did you know that I think that he was married to a Chilean opera singer, Felicia Montealegre?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah, funny. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So do you think you have any influence of the music that he used to make and conduct? Because he also made great music.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I actually, yeah. So I mean, I was born in the late 70s, so I didn't watch his TV show when it was
uh-huh,
on, obviously. But
uh-huh.
as a kid, I remember just like being introduced to his music through his popular stuff like West Side Story and Candide and his musical work. But he has just an amazing library of like concert work that he wrote, like orchestral 20th century, really sophisticated, intelligent, emotional, like orchestral music that's not for the theater. And the guy, you can just tell through his music that he's like from another universe, kind of,
Yeah.
and it comes through in his music. So yeah, I mean, I think he makes a lot of really interesting musical decisions, like different unique musical decisions with his writing. And I think, if you just listen to it enough throughout your life, it definitely seeps into what you do as an artist a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and besides Leonard Bernstein and all the music he's involved with, uh, I also saw some pictures of records by Oasis,
Mm,
ELO, Jeff Lynne, Pink Floyd, of course, the Beatles. Who wouldn't
yeah.
be attached to those guys? Yeah, is that part of your
Yeah.
dad's influence, maybe? I think he maybe is or was interested in Genesis too.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of discovered music through like my dad isn't a musician at all. He's actually a physicist, but we had a record player when I was a kid, and he just had records of the Beatles, and he had a couple Rush records and Steve Winwood, who I love. So a lot of stuff from like the 60s and 70s that I was just kind of like, oh, what's this? And I put it on, and it was just transported to this other place, the other world musically. So yeah, I grew up listening to all of that stuff, and that's kind of what formed my interest in music was, Genesis, Rush, Beatles, Steve Winwood. But he also had classical records, like a Respighi, Pines of the Roman trilogy, Pines
Yeah.
of Rome, stuff like that. So I was listening to tons of different, widely varying styles of music, and that's what got me interested in playing an instrument, and then eventually later on in life making music.
And don't you think that it's amazing how that music remains untouched by time, whether you talk about
Yeah.
Respighi or yeah, Stravinsky in my case, I'm a big fan of him.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And well, because I was going to ask you, how do you see the today's music scene? That I think it's very much into a pattern. Everything seems like to
Yeah.
be tailor-made for a certain market, you know,
Yeah.
and it's very different. There's no, it's my own personal feeling that the music doesn't flow as much as it did in the past. You have such great singers and composers like Elton John. Well, you name them. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
everything
honestly
is.
don't listen. Yeah, I don't listen to a lot of modern music. My only like connection to music that's being made is through my kids now because they listen to some pop music and stuff. And like Dua Lipa, who I hadn't listened to, but my youngest, she's like, "Dad, you got to check this out." And I actually listened to it, and she was actually pretty good. But on the whole, like I kind of listen to the music that I've always listened to. I just feel like, yeah, kind of like what you said, at least pop music. I think there's a lot of really interesting music being made today.
Mhm,
It just no one's hearing it. No one's
exactly.
finding it
Yeah,
because of the way that music's distributed digitally through algorithms and streaming. Only that top 0.1% of artists are being listened to by people. So it's sort of this downward spiral of quality and people copying each other and to get your music into that algorithm so people can listen to it. Um,
yeah.
so yeah,
Well,
I just don't listen to a lot of modern music and yeah.
so sorry, when did you say you were born?
I was born in 77.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what great album was released back in those days? Remember that? Some
Oh
Rush
man,
album, of
so
course.
many. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean Rush. We love my whole family. I love Billy Joel.
Okay.
God. Okay, so actually one group that I really like, sort of an obscure group that I discovered 6 or 7 years ago is a French electronic duo, and I'm not going to say Daft Punk.
I
It's a
know who
group
the.
called it's Space Art.
Yes.
So these guys, their first album came out in 77, and they're just like now they're sort of lost to time unless you're really into this type of music. But yeah, these they were sort of the pioneers of electronic music, synthesizer music, right? And so
Yeah.
Space Art was, and it sounds like you know about them.
Yeah, I've been playing them and collecting them since the mid 80s. They are really amazing.
Yeah,
Unlikely, not all of them are alive, but they were two guys. And,
yeah.
one of them was related to Jean-Michel Jarre's band.
Hmm.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
as you
so I picked
say,
up their vinyl. I have all three of they re-released their vinyl
yes.
5 or 6 years ago, and so I picked those up really quick before they went out of stock, but they're fantastic.
Yeah, it's very elegant,
Hmm.
dynamic, and interesting music. Yes,
Yeah.
I was going to jump to the issue, Jeff, about music platforms. Now that you mentioned them, uh,
Hmm.
I was going to ask you: do you think music platforms today create hard-eye fans as the past regarding being able to just buy one track of the album, not the whole album, not getting familiar with the artwork? And I think that's very different these days. So I don't think
Yeah.
people have the time to develop a certain love or passion for the artist as we did in my case back in the 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
where you would follow bands, where you had your favorites. Yeah, I teach and I always ask
Yeah.
my students, do you have favorites? Oh, no, we don't.
Which is sort of weird, right? To think about, like, how is that possible?
Yeah,
I feel like it's just changed. The music industry has changed so much because back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even through the early 90s, if you wanted to listen to music, you would go out and buy an album. You would buy the physical CD or tape or record.
hmm,
And so the only way to listen to and your relationship to the music was through that wonderful, complete statement that the artist was making, right? It was a series of songs that was sort of taking you on a journey. It was telling a story, and you formed like a connection to it, right? You formed like an emotional connection to that album, and then that made you a fan, and then you wanted to continue to go on a journey with that band or with that artist or whatever. Yeah, so
yeah.
that's how I grew up too. And I don't do singles. I don't like listening. I don't make playlists. I mean, I know that makes me sound old, makes us sound out of touch, but I still like to just put a record on or listen to a CD and listen to a whole album all the way from start to finish. But I feel like it's kind of sad that that seems to be a dying way of listening to music, but I don't know. Hopefully it'll come back.
Well, I think it has
I don't know
already come
how.
back. Yeah, they say that the vinyl
Yeah.
sales are getting lower, but I mean, I'm not sure. The problem to me is that vinyl these days is so very expensive. Yeah, it seems that they are pressing gold.
Hmm.
Yeah, and even
Yeah.
these the
Yeah, but that's how
quality.
I like to listen to music.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sometimes no, it's okay. Sometimes the quality of pressings these days is not really up to what we used to get back in the 70s or 80s. They were never
Hmm.
perfect, but I've heard such bands as Pink Floyd on the very noisy pressings these days. I have to say that because some people say, "Oh, Pink Floyd presses in
Mm.
the best places around the world." No, it's just one more band. So you
Right.
haven't you thought of releasing any of your records on vinyl, or is there any out there already?
Yeah. I would love to release on vinyl. I don't think I have a big enough audience to
Okay,
make it economically feasible right now. That's the main problem is that you have to have a pretty, if you think about like it's expensive to press vinyl as an artist. So you need to have a really big following and audience because if you think about it, only a small percentage of those people will buy the vinyl, right? So it's kind of a numbers game. You know, if you have 1 million followers or whatever, a certain percentage of those will buy vinyl. So you need to sort of, for
yeah.
me, it's not, it wouldn't be worth probably the cost of the investment because there's not enough people to funnel down to purchase it, unfortunately. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
that would be the dream.
Yeah, I've seen some young guys like yourself and very talented ones uh, who seem to be climbing up the ladder positively, like John Jagos, Brother Tiger, who also makes amazing music.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know where
Yeah,
he's from.
I mean, the frustrating thing is that it's so hard to get people to listen. It's so oversaturated,
Yes,
as an independent musician or producer, it's just every single person with a laptop and a couple $100 can
make you
release
happy.
music.
Yes.
So it's just staggering the amount of, if you look at the statistics, it's like 100,000 songs being released every day or something on
Yeah,
Spotify. It's like, so even if you have great music, it's not enough anymore. It used to be enough back in the day, where if you had talent, you would just rise up and you'd get a record deal and people would listen to you. But now it's so hard to cut through the noise and get people to hear your music.
I'm sure it has a little or maybe a lot to do with your other area of work, which is visuals. I think that young people these days need everything to be visual
Mm.
and fast,
Hmm.
and they won't stand listening. I teach, so that I that's what I know that it's
Yeah.
difficult to get their attention for more than 20 minutes. That's why I think that technology, these little demons, have helped us a lot, but they
Yeah.
have, yeah, they are
Yeah.
causing a big cultural change. Not all the time for me, very positive. I don't know what's your view on technology these days. It's fantastic, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's double-bladed to me.
Well, one of the songs on my new album that I released is called Technology. That's the title of the song. And it's the whole point of it is like sort of a cautionary tale. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think about that a lot, especially because I have kids. So my wife and I are constantly sort of battling technology with them. It's a huge stress point for parents of this generation is just protecting your kids from the addiction of screens, you know? And you teach too, so these students, just put the stupid thing away and be present, Um,
Yeah, the problem is that you become the stupid thing in the movie, not the cell phone.
yeah,
So
that's
you
right.
become a little bit useless from time to time. And it's a sad vision. I'm sorry, but yeah,
Oh, no.
it can be quite hard. I was going to mention, Jeff,
Mhm.
you delivered Liquid Crystal Daydreams in April 2024, and then you liberated, I think, not long ago, Citizen Generator. So you've been very generous.
Oh, well, actually, Liquid Crystal Daydreams was 2022.
Yeah, sorry. That's already
Yeah, no,
done.
that's okay. Yeah, but the most recent one was yeah, Citizen Generator. That was this spring. Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, yeah. What's your view of just delivering this music for free? Uh, how does it work? I think Bandcamp is a
yeah.
good contribution to for independent musicians like yourself to reach people, and they can choose tracks, which I wouldn't do. I'm the album type of guy. But
Yeah.
yeah, how do these platforms help you
Yeah.
promote your music?
Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
a lot of independent musicians are like, why am I torturing myself? It's like takes so much time and energy to like create good music. that you're proud of. And there's very little financial return. I mean, it's the vast majority of, I'm talking 99% of people making music make little to no money. There's a very small percentage of people at the top who can make enough to live on. So to answer your question, for me, and I feel like I'm fairly representative of most people releasing music on Spotify and Bandcamp and stuff. We just do it because it's fun. I do it because it's a hobby. I enjoy making music.
Yeah, and your music seems to be, in my impression, quite happy, dynamic. You seem to be a happy person. It comes from somebody who's he's okay
Yeah,
with that fact. Yeah, because I know, there are so many different electronic artists,
yeah.
so to speak, that some others make some this kind of much darker music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
I
seem
think
to,
if I had to support a family by making music, my music would be really dark and angry because it's impossible to do that basically. But I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I have a good career. I mean, I don't, making music is not like my full-time gig. I work in video games. That's my
yeah,
career where I earn a
yeah,
salary and benefits and support my family. So the music is
uh-huh,
just purely a creative outlet. It's a way for me to express myself, and it's making music is, I love the process. And I just kind of hope that like I just try to make music that I like and that I connect to emotionally, and I hope that when I release it, it'll find an audience and people will enjoy it. But I'm not doing it for money because it's pretty tough to do that.
yeah. I understand. Uh, Before going to another topic, which is very interesting, is the cinematic design. I
Mhm.
was going to ask you. You said that you might be making this much angry music in other conditions. Besides Space Art, which you just recently discovered, what other bands in the electronic scene have you become a fan of or have been able to discover lately? Because there's so many. I personally began with Tangerine Dreams, Robicon,
Right.
Tomita, uh, Synergy, whom I love, and a few others. Jean-Michel
Hmm.
Jarre back in '76. But there's a huge amount of names. Would you mention other
Yeah.
names that have influenced you or do you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned, I listened to when I was a kid. That's how I was introduced to synthesizers, was through Rush, was through Steve Winwood, who they featured these instruments on their albums. And I remember as a kid, I didn't know where those sounds were coming from. Like, what was the source of those amazing textures, right? So that's how I discovered it, was through a lot of that, through film too, right? Synthesizers and electronic instrumentation was very popular in the 70s and 80s on film scores. I mean, I still kind of, that's what I listen to mostly these days. But let's see, there's a couple artists that I really like on that I listen to. So I don't even do Spotify. I just buy music physically or on Bandcamp. There's a really great artist, and I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name, but Jasper de Custer,
Mhm.
Dekuester. I think he's from Belgium. I'm not exactly sure where he's from, but he's an electronic musician. Really great stuff. Let's see. Who else do I listen to on Bandcamp?
Maybe,
Droid Bishop. I don't know if you've ever heard of Droid Bishop before.
no, no, no.
You'd probably like him. He's pretty fantastic. He's kind of got like a funk, electronic funk, the 80s kind of electro funk style, which I like. Let's see.
I suppose that
There's
maybe, yeah, some John
no,
Carpenter, if you mention films.
yeah, yeah, stuff from like the cheeseball 80s movies,
Yeah,
Halloween and Escape from New York and all that. But like recent musicians, those would be some of them. But yeah, but again, like most of the time I spend listening to like pop and rock is mostly in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s is kind of where my love is, where my heart is.
is there any famous band from Indiana where you're from?
I don't think so.
No.
No. Yeah, not there's not a huge music scene around here, unfortunately.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you get to see live concerts sometimes?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
every once in a while. So, yep, so let's see. We saw Billy Joel came 2 years ago to our town, which was amazing. So we took the whole family, my wife and kids, and that was amazing. We drove
Sting,
up to,
maybe?
yeah.
Sorry.
So I was just going to say we drove up to Grand Rapids. It was actually a month after seeing Billy Joel, and we in Grand Rapids, Michigan, we saw Sting, who I've seen several times.
Uh,
Um, let's see who else I saw. I've seen Rush
oh,
in the early 2000s.
they were announcing they
Hey,
would reunite with somebody else, with some other drum player. Yeah,
I didn't heard that. Did that
yeah.
happen recently? Oh,
Yes,
really?
like yeah, a couple of years ago, I think that somebody, I mean, Alex and Getty announced that
Yeah.
they might return. You know,
I always kind of think that's a bad idea, but we'll see.
yeah, yeah.
Oasis, I've seen live. Yeah, lots of stuff. Like just yeah. Who else? Cake. I don't know if you've ever listened to the band Cake before. They're pretty awesome.
No,
They were popular in the 90s.
uh-huh.
So yeah, I have a family of musicians and music lovers, so we like to go whenever we can.
Okay, that's good. Now, how do your audiovisual abilities, Jeff, trigger music in you and vice versa? I don't know what comes first. Do you ever think of, do you ever get mental images to create music, or,
Mm.
you know, or how does the process
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I as a kid I was always interested in drawing and art and like I as I mentioned I was a brass player, so I started playing trombone when I was in like fourth grade and played all the way through college. But yeah, I mean to me like art, visuals and sound and music all are the same thing to me. It's a way of seeing the world and sort of processing the world for me. It was has always been a way of like sort of expressing the way I feel about things was through art and music. So yeah, I mean, I went to film school as an undergrad and
Mm,
went to graduate school for animation, and then that's what I've been doing for my career. My whole life has been animation and cinematic design and game development at game studios. Um, and then music production I wasn't even aware of like the tools of making music until about 10 years ago. I bought a Roland synthesizer just kind of for fun, and it came with a little download key for Ableton Live. And I was kind of like, what's this? Never heard of this before. And so I downloaded it and installed it, and I'm like, oh man, I can make music. So I sort of combined my interest in performing music with my interest in listening to music and then started just learning how to compose and produce music. This was eight or maybe not 8 or 9 years ago. And then that sort of just snowballed and led to me improving my skills and making more complex music until I was able to make release music that I thought was good enough that people would enjoy listening to.
So what is the more fun, Jeff, listening to or making music? What a question.
I probably do more listening to music these days just because life is so busy with work and family,
Mm,
but
mm,
I usually sneak in making music on the weekends or early mornings before my workday starts. And
mm.
once I start making the music, I get into this zone. I get so focused and time sort of dissolves away. So I love making music. It's just a matter of finding or making time to do it.
Have you ever attempt singing?
So I do some vocal work on my albums.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a very good voice, so not a whole lot of that. I most of the on my albums, like if I have like actual vocal tracks, I hire vocalists, but I'll do some like background harmonies and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, are there any film directors you would like to work for, or any particular genre in film that you might want be interested in making music for?
I'm actually like kind of interested in writing for games, writing music for
Mm-hmm.
games, just because that's I've been working in that medium my whole life. So I'm actually for the last couple of years I've been helping out with a few independent game studios as a composer, just sort of on the side. So yeah, that's the games are unreleased; they're still being made, but that's these are people that I've known for a long time who have sort of started up their
Mm-hmm.
own game studios, and so I'm doing some
Mm-hmm.
scoring work in games on the side, which I'm hoping to do more of in the future.
Well, there's another British artist you might like too. I'm a big fan of his work is Thomas Dolby, related to video games and music.
Oh, okay.
As far as I know, he created the ringtones, and he came up with this very crazy song, "She Blinded Me with Science" back in the early '80s.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and she's
He wrote
playing
that.
tilted. Yeah, yeah, he did.
Okay.
But his records are amazing. Not only the hits, but he has very incredible emotional music. I was going
Yeah.
to ask you about these bands, Rush, Genesis, we've been talking about. How do you think they made a difference? Because again, we were talking about how music these days doesn't sound too attractive as it did in the past. What did they do well?
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, I think Rush, Genesis, Pink Floyd, these are all kind of like progressive rock bands, right?
mm,
That's sort of the genre that they work in. And so I'm just a huge fan of progressive rock. But I mean, that's what progressive rock is progressive. It's different. It's unique. It's sort of changing the rules of what rock music was at the time
mm,
because it's progressive, right? Um, so I mean, they were pioneers. They wrote the rules. They changed the direction that rock, from like Elvis and the Beatles, right? They turned that into something that was technically complex and emotional and longer formats of songs where the lengths of the songs were longer. So yeah, I mean they were just doing really creative stuff that no one else was doing at the time. So I think that's kind of how they contributed.
but some people call them pompous and exaggerated and ridiculous. I don't know if it happened with Mozart or Haydn. I'm not
Yeah.
comparing them, but I don't know. You have spoilers every time, in every epoch. So yeah,
Well, that's what makes them great. They don't care. They're just
uh-huh,
doing what they want to do, right? Like Rush would
uh-huh.
make these songs that were like 15 minutes long. They're like, screw you.
Yeah,
Like we don't
yeah,
care. And but the
uh-huh.
thing with Rush too is that they were like really smart guys. Like they were very intellectual. They read a lot. They were
Yes,
very intellectual people. So that came through in their music with their lyrics and their time
yes,
signature changes and stuff. They're extremely probably one of the most musical bands of all time, in my opinion. Pink
yeah.
Floyd as well, right?
Well, in the case of Yes, don't forget that Jen Anderson would sing the introduction to Rite of Spring in during the Yes shows era. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's right.
yeah, I'm sure that many young people discover Stravinsky maybe through Yes, as it happened to me
Yeah.
with Fantasia. You remember Fantasia? Have you ever seen it
Yeah.
by Walt
Oh
Disney?
yeah.
That's where I
hmm
discovered Mussorgsky
Yeah.
and yeah. So
Sting is
yeah,
the same way. Sting and Billy Joel, I think, are two of the greatest songwriters of all time. Hands down. I mean, Sting's music is so amazingly well written, and he has a lot of jazz and classical influences in his music as well.
yeah, Wide Scope. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh. Now you have worked for synthesizer companies, so you've had the chance to get acquainted with several types of keyboards. How does it work for you? How has it been?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I write like promotional tracks and demos for Cherry Audio. And Cherry Audio is this great software synthesizer company. So if you make music, you're probably familiar with them. They just create just wonderful software instruments that you can use in like Ableton or Logic or whatever. So yeah, they're really, really cool. They're a pretty small company, but their instruments are great. And um, I connected with them 2 years ago. I
Hmm.
just actually reached out to them and I said, "Hey, I use your instruments on my albums. I love your albums. I would love to like work with you guys somehow." And they listened to my stuff and they wrote back and they're like, "Yeah, this is great. Why don't we, when we're working on a new instrument, we'll send you a download for the instrument and you can use it, write a little demo track for us, and we'll put it on the store page." So that's my relationship with them is doing that.
So you've been using the ARP Pro Soloist in most of the records, you say?
So what I usually do with Cherry is like they'll give me the instrument and then I'll write like a really short minute and a half long
Hmm.
demo. And then what I do is I'll take that demo track and then I'll expand it into a full song, right? Like 3 or 4 minute long song, and then I'll use that on my next album. So yeah,
Yeah.
Pro Soloist will be on the next album. What are the other ones? The PS 3300, the Korg. Um, yeah, so it's really fun because they make amazing instruments and they send them to me for free and I get to use them on my next album, which is great.
Yeah. Now, tell us about the artwork of your album covers. It's that's special. It's like
Oh,
futuristic
thanks.
and yeah, and it looks great.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of surrealism, the surrealism art movement. So, Salvador Dali, Rene Magritte.
Hmm.
So that's a great example of what you were saying before is like how do visuals and interest in music and visuals come together. For me, it's like when I'm working on album art, it should be like an emotional thing. Should make you
Hmm.
feel something immediately when you see it, right? And hopefully it relates to the emotional focus of the music. Like, what does the music make you feel? Hopefully the
Hmm.
album art makes you feel something, or it makes you imagine things, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now you got kids, so how do you see that new generations uh, depend on visuals and not only sound and music as we did? I mean, the older people. Uh, do you ever have, do you ever chat about these topics with your kids?
Yeah.
What do they look for? What do they enjoy most?
So it's actually interesting with my kids is that I took them to a record store for the first time this year.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
had never been to a record store, and I walked in and they were like, "This is awesome," like, and I was telling them like that's the whole point is you walk into a record store, you don't really know what you want. That's the whole fun of it is it's like this little adventure that you go
Mhm.
on and you find stuff that you didn't know you were looking for.
Mhm.
And then you go home and you just put it on and you sit there and you listen to it
Mhm.
without looking at something or without consuming some sort of video, right, at the same time. So I think like that was the joy of music for me as a kid is that you put the headphones on or you put the record on and it's all about the music. And when you listen to the music, you start thinking about things and you start imagining and creating stories in your head. So the old way of listening to music sort of encouraged creative thinking, right?
Exactly.
Now, when you're listening to music, you got to be there, you're being fed all this stuff. And so you're not actually using your brain, you're not using your creativity or your imagination because you're being fed something.
Yeah.
So I try to like just put on and so yeah, so my kids actually bought some records and now they just sit down and listen to music. So I feel like I'm being a
Mhm.
good dad.
And what did they buy?
Let's see. Well, my middle daughter bought a Taylor Swift album.
Yeah.
That's okay. Could be worse, right? Could
A
be
color,
worse.
a color, a color pressing, probably a color pressing. It's in vogue these days. The color
Yeah.
records.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse. Like, yeah. Let's see. My son, he's my oldest. He bought Tyler the Creator. He likes a lot. I'm not
Okay.
super familiar with his music, but he's actually pretty creative with his albums. Um, and then my youngest hasn't bought any records, but she listens to all my stuff. So she's a huge Phil Collins fan. And
Uh-huh.
Bruce Hornsby, we've been listening to a lot lately,
Ah, fantastic.
who's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm getting her
Yeah.
into the good stuff. Yeah.
Well, we still have hopes of from Phil Collins going to Genesis, so there's a bright light there.
Yeah.
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 Uh-huh. Now, there's what they call this new retro wave synth music community,
Mm.
and they have launched interesting names like some of them I like a lot, like Calax, Mr. Serpent, Allison from France, among
Oh
many
yeah, he's
others.
great.
Yeah,
Allison is great. Yeah.
yes. How do you explain the resurgence of the sound? Is today's music so different? Is it, I mean, synthesizers are always there, but there's something that's typically from the 80s that made
Hmm.
this new old new wave so powerful and nostalgic, and it has so many special features that
Yeah.
I don't find today. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder the same thing. A lot of times I wonder who the heck is even listening to my music? Who is like what demographic of people? Is it I don't know if it's young people or if it's mostly people, 30, 40, 50 and older who are sort of feeling the nostalgia. I think a
Hey,
lot of this,
greetings. I'm
yeah,
60.
I think a lot of this retro wave synthwave music is sort of framed around nostalgia. It's these sounds that we heard in the 70s and 80s
Uh-huh.
coming through in the music. So Probably, I'm guessing that a lot of the people that enjoy listening to this music are 40 and over, 35, 40 and over, who are sort of re-experiencing their youth.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Um,
Human League and Gary Newman and all that.
and all
Yeah.
that, yeah. Pet Shop
Uh-huh.
Boys,
Sure. Yeah.
Depeche Mode.
Uh-huh. Now, I know that you've had some collaborations from King Protea. Is that right? Kelly Besh.
Hmm.
I was going to ask you, do you think synthesizer or synth music is more a male current, a male tendency? I don't remember many women into
Yeah,
synthesizers, you know, apart from
yeah.
you have Susan Ciani, you have, of course, Wendy Carlos, but it's not in pop. I don't think
Yeah, the
many
people
pop.
making
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
seems like the people making the music are, at least anecdotally, seem to be mostly male. I don't know who the if people listening to it, I'm not sure. Or also, it's really hard to know as a musician, like the demographic of the people listening to your music. Because I don't
Uh,
play live. I don't go to a concert and be like, oh, it's 95% male. I can't look out and see the people. But at least anecdotally, it seems like it's largely a male audience.
would you like to play live? Have you?
No, not really.
I know.
I loved playing live. So I played in bands and orchestras and drum corps and jazz combos my whole life from when I was a kid all the way through my early 20s. There was something really exciting and fun that I loved about playing in a band, like in a live band. For me now, I just don't have time. I think is what it is. I focus on just making, with the time that I have, I spend it making studio albums. Um, but the thought of like translating my music, which I create really meticulously in a studio, into a live setting with a band would seems like it would just be way too much for at this point in my life to handle. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon. But yeah,
Never lose hope. Yeah, you never know.
yeah, yeah. Never
Now,
know.
uh-huh. Uh, do you have any favorites, Jeff, in the animation area? Of course, I'm a big fan of the Quay brothers. This other guy
Mm,
who's famous, Ian Schwankmeyer. Uh,
yeah,
uh-huh,
yeah. So those are yeah some of the Eastern European
animators.
early stop motion animators. Yeah. Someone I remember when I was in grad school a long time ago, I discovered Bill Plimpton.
Yeah.
He does some really offbeat stuff. As a kid, I loved watching Ren and Stimpy. I still think that's one of the greatest cartoons of all time because it's just so off the wall. So John Kay was the creator of that. Oh, geez.
Yeah, now that you mentioned
Yeah,
animation has changed so much.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah,
It's very corporate. It's very corporate now, you know? It's
yeah.
made by huge companies like Disney and DreamWorks and stuff, so you don't get there's not a lot of that sort of offbeat. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that because YouTube, right? YouTube is where we find all the weird stuff now. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And is Bill Clinton popular among kids or young
I
people
don't
everywhere?
think so. He's sort of, I feel like he's sort of lost to time at this point.
Uh-huh.
But he was really important to me when I was studying animation because he was doing some really wild, unique stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, the smoking sequences were so funny and extreme. Yeah, people
Yeah.
smoking and kissing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Now, this is one of my usual questions with people like you.
Mhm.
Could you mention some of your biggest achievements so far, Jeff, and something about your wishes and dreams on the to-do list? What's coming for you?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, outside of music, I'm proud of the fact that I have made a career out of working in video games for almost 23 years. That's a really long time. So surviving in an industry that is pretty high pressure. It's a deadline driven industry, you know, so there's always deadlines. There's a lot of pressure to do your best work and to make great games that are critically and commercially successful. So I'm
Hmm.
proud of the fact that I've worked on some really great games and survived in that industry. Musically, just the fact that I'm releasing music. I have no formal education in music production or composition, so sort of self-taught. So I'm just
Okay.
happy that I'm able. I have the tools available now that I can teach myself and just produce and release my own music that people like. So I'm happy about that. Um, geez, goals for the future. Uh, I want more people to listen to my music. I don't
Hmm.
know, it's so hard to do that. And I'm going to continue releasing albums. But yeah, something I'd really like to do, like I mentioned before, was work on game music. Gotten feedback from people that listen to my albums and they're like, "Oh, this would sound really awesome in a video game." And so that's something I'm actively trying to do.
Did you are you a video game yourself? A player? I mean, a gamer?
I don't really have a ton of time anymore to play games, but yeah, I love playing games whenever I have the chance. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And there's this ongoing discussion. Are they positive? Could they become complicated with kids?
As far as,
Yeah, violence and all that stuff. That some of them.
oh, I mean, there's actually been a lot of research that's shown that there's actually no real connection at all between content in video games and behavior in real life. So I tend to agree with that. In fact, I
Uh,
think there's more violence in movies and TV shows than there is in video games, right?
and in real life, isn't there?
And in real life, yeah. And I don't think
Yeah.
I think the people that are the people the real world violence kind of comes from um, mental health issues, which I think is why that's become such an important topic
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
society, right? Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think it's video games that are causing people to murder people. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Now, where can people go to check out your music? I recommend this. For now, the only physical album I have, and it's a great one. I presented this album last year on my radio special, so
Hmm.
I really recommend uh,
Yeah.
Electron Odyssey. Do you have a Bandcamp page where people can
Yeah,
get
I
it?
would
Yeah.
say, yep, the best way. So I'm on pretty much all the streaming music platforms that are available. You can find my music. But yeah, Bandcamp is always the best. So I have the first two albums I have CD releases of. They're all available digitally as well. So yeah, it's Electron. If you just go to bandcamp.com and search for Electron Odyssey, you'll see
Hmm.
me. But yeah, you can buy the digital, you can buy the physical. It's all there.
Okay. And how much how important you think the physical records are still today? Well, I myself prefer physical records than
I
digital.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I,
prefer it too. I still think more people are purchasing and listening to music digitally, but there does seem to be like a resurgence of interest in physical media, especially vinyl and audio cassette, which is pretty funny because audio cassettes are like the worst quality of physical media
yeah.
compared to
Well,
CD and vinyl, in
of
my
course.
opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah. I just
nostalgic thing.
it is. I just found an interesting documentary, like 30 minutes on YouTube, about the creator of cassettes in Holland, a gentleman
Mhm.
that's no longer with us. But it's fun to see that they are coming back. I think
Yeah.
there's even a slight return of the open reel tape, which is so fascinating and sounds so great, but it's
Yeah.
so difficult and has
Yeah.
so many technical issues. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
it's
don't.
it's it's pretty niche. I mean, like even the audio cassettes, there's like this very small community of people who are very retro, you know.
Uh-huh.
It's fun. I
Yeah.
actually released my first album on cassette as well. So that's been fun to see people buying that. Actually, one of my friends locally has I think it's like a 1985 Firebird car with an audio cassette deck in it. So I gave him a tape and he likes to put it in and listen like it's in the 80s. So he
Mhm.
enjoys that a lot.
But for cassette tape, you have to compress the material. You have to. I mean, no, that's the case of more vinyl. I guess you have to compress music more for vinyl than any
Yeah,
other format. Yeah.
yeah, I haven't done vinyl yet, but for audio cassette, I worked with a guy in New York who does that's just what he does is he works with artists to make vinyl, so or to make cassettes. So yeah, I
Hmm.
just sent him the like the way that audio cassettes work is you send him one really long audio file per side of the cassette. So I had to make like a side A and a side B master wave file that had all of the songs timed out. and then he just records it to cassette using his machines. So I didn't have to do anything special on my end.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And are you kids getting your cassette tapes as collector's items?
Yeah.
Because
I
they
have
will be
a
gone. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I have a box full of the remaining stock in my bedroom closet right now. So yeah, so
Mhm.
they we have a CD, my CDs in the CD wallet that we play sometimes.
Okay, Jeff, you've been very kind, very interesting
Sure.
and fun conversation. Glad that we finally made contact.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, don't hang up. Uh, I'm going to ask you for a few radio IDs. I'm planning to play more of your music on my special soon. So
Okay.
thanks for the time. I wish you
Sure.
the best of lucks in music and your audiovisual work. By the way, I was forgetting this. Where can people visit your audiovisual, the work you usually do? Is there a platform, a place, a web
Yeah,
page?
I have a portfolio of my work that I've done in game development. It's on Behance, Behance. That's Adobe's portfolio site.
Okay,
So
okay,
if you just go to Behance, BEHANCE.com and then backslash Jeff Spoonhower, JEFFSPOONHOWER. Yeah.
okay.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Or you can just search for it, but that's where I put
Well,
my professional stuff. Yeah.
okay. Well, thanks again. Take good care. Take good care of your family.
Thank you.
Go on being happy because you look happy and your music sounds great like that.
I
Don't be
appreciate
angry.
it. I
Yeah.
won't. I won't.
Bye bye.